Hello, and welcome back to Echoes of the Forgotten. Tonight, I invite you to listen carefully, not just with your ears, but with the part of your mind that still remembers fear. Because some stories were never meant to be told, they were meant to be buried. And yet, every once in a while, they find a frequency. Tonight's story is about a radio station that officially shut down in 1997. No staff, no power, no signal, and yet people still hear it. This is the last broadcast. In the winter of 2019, a man named Daniel Crow was driving alone through rural West Virginia, a journalist by trade, a skeptic by nature. It was 2:17 a.m. when his car radio turned on by itself. Static, then a voice. "If you can hear this, you're already too close." Daniel slammed the brakes. The road was empty. Trees stood like black silhouettes, watching. The voice continued. "This is station W117. We are still here." Daniel knew that call sign. Every journalist did. W117 burned down 22 years ago. 6 employees died inside. The recordings were lost. The case was closed. But the voice on the radio was clear, and it was live. Against every instinct, Daniel followed the signal. Each mile, the static grew stronger. The voice began to whisper his name. The building stood at the end of a dead road. Collapsed tower, broken windows, the smell of ash that never faded. Entered with a flashlight and a recorder. Inside, the clocks were still running, all of them, every single one frozen at 2:17. The recording light blinked, and suddenly the studio microphone turned on. "You made it." Daniel dropped the recorder. The voice came from the headphones and from the walls. He saw them then, reflections in the glass, 6 figures, burned, smiling. They were still broadcasting, still trapped in the moment of their deaths, and they needed listeners. Daniel discovered the truth hidden in the old tapes. The fire was no accident. W117 had been running a late-night program, a program that never aired publicly. They called it the Confession Hour. Listeners called in, spoke their worst sins, and the station recorded them. But something answered back, something that lived in the signal. Every confession fed it, and when the staff tried to stop the broadcast, the signal burned the building. But it didn't die. It waited. Daniel realized too late. The station wasn't transmitting, it was receiving. And now it was recording him. The microphones lowered. The red light turned on. Confess. His secrets spilled out, things he never told anyone. The walls pulsed, the figures grew solid, the signal screamed. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the station disappeared, and so did Daniel. 3 weeks later, a new broadcast appeared. Same frequency, same static, but a different voice. Daniel's voice. "If you can hear this, turn it off." So, if your radio ever turns on by itself, if you hear static breathing, if a voice says your name, don't listen, because the signal is still out there, and it's always looking for a new host. Static slowly fades out. This has been Echoes of the Forgotten. Sleep well, if you can.
In 2008, Margaret Hale received a letter that should not have existed. It informed her she had inherited a house. She didn't recognize the address. She didn't recognize the name of the sender. But the key was inside. Old, cold, heavy. The house stood alone at the end of a dirt road. No neighbors, no signal, no sound except the wind pushing against the walls. When Margaret opened the door, the smell of dust and time filled her lungs. And somewhere inside the house, a floorboard creaked in reply. The house was bigger inside, rooms where there should be walls, hallways that bent when you weren't looking. Every room held objects that didn't belong to Margaret: photos, clothes, children's drawings. But the faces in the photographs, they were all her. Different ages, different clothes, different expressions. In the bedroom, a mirror whispered, "You came back." Margaret ran, but the front door was gone. The house had closed itself. The truth waited in the basement, a room with no windows, only names carved into the walls, hundreds of them, all crossed out, except one: Margaret Hale. The house was not inherited, it was returned. She had lived there before, died there before, many times. The house fed on memory, and every time she forgot, it let her leave, and when she remembered, it brought her back. Margaret reached the final door. Inside was a child, sitting on the floor, drawing the house. The child looked up and smiled. "You're home." The walls began to breathe, the ceiling lowered, the rooms collapsed into one. Margaret remembered everything, and the house finally closed its eyes. The house still stands, but no one can find it, unless it remembers you. So if you ever dream of a place you've never been, if you recognize rooms you've never seen, don't go looking, because some homes don't want visitors. They want you back. In 2015, an online forum dedicated to abandoned radio signals began collecting strange recordings. They all shared one thing in common: a frequency, 91.7 FM. No station was registered there, no broadcast license, no tower. And yet, every night at exactly 2:17 a.m., the signal came alive, static at first, then breathing, then voices. Not speaking, whispering, names. People who listened too long started to notice something. The voices weren't random. They were personal. They knew things. One of the forum members, Ethan Moore, decided to record the signal overnight. 8 hours of static. At sunrise, he played it back and heard himself, crying, begging, screaming for someone to stop the broadcast. But Ethan had never recorded his voice. The forum filled with panic. More people listened, more people recorded, and every recording contained the same thing: the listener's future, moments that hadn't happened yet, accidents, arguments, deaths. The signal was not predicting, it was remembering. Ethan traced the frequency to an underground relay station buried beneath an abandoned hospital. No power, no equipment, only wires disappearing into the concrete, and a single speaker, still warm. When he touched it, the voices stopped, and one voice spoke clearly: "You're early." The walls vibrated. The hospital lights turned on for the first time in decades. The static returned, louder, angrier.
The voices were not trapped in the signal was trapped in them. At 2:17 a.m., the relay activated. The walls peeled back, revealing hundreds of people, frozen, listening, all wearing headphones, their mouths open, their eyes empty. Ethan understood. The signal needed new listeners, new voices, and once you heard yourself in the static, you were already part of it. The headphones slid onto his ears by themselves, and the world went quiet. The forum went offline 2 days later. The frequency still exists, but it's stronger now. So if your radio ever turns on by itself, if static starts to sound like breathing, if you hear your name, don't adjust the dial, don't listen closer, because the moment you recognize the voice, it recognizes you too. Static swells, then cuts to silence. This has been Echoes of the Forgotten, and tonight's echo is already listening. In 2021, an audio archivist named Lucas Reed bought a box of old cassette tapes at an estate sale. Most were blank, some were labeled, one wasn't. It had no markings, no date, no brand, only one word carved into the plastic: play. When Lucas inserted the tape into his recorder, the machine hesitated. Then the tape began to move. Static filled the room, and underneath it, breathing. Not someone breathing near the microphone, someone breathing inside the tape. Lucas cleaned the audio, slowed it down, isolated the frequencies, and that's when the voices appeared. Dozens of them, layered, overlapping, all saying the same thing: we are still recording. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the tape changed. A man began speaking. His voice was calm, tired. If you're hearing this, it means we failed. The man explained that the tape was part of a government experiment. They were trying to record time, moments that refused to end, moments of fear, moments of death, moments of regret. The tape wasn't playing memories, it was trapping them. The longer Lucas listened, the more the tape changed. New sounds appeared, doors closing, footsteps, and then Lucas heard himself, laughing, talking, screaming, sounds he hadn't made yet. The tape was no longer recording the past, it was recording him. At 2:17 a.m., his recorder turned on by itself, the tape began to rewind, and a new voice was added, his own. Please stop listening. Lucas tried to destroy the tape. He burned it, cut it, snapped it in half, but every morning it was whole again, playing, softly, waiting. On the 7th night, Lucas disappeared. All that remained was the recorder and a new label carved into the tape, a name, yours. The tape is still circulating. It changes hands, changes places, but it always finds a listener. So if you ever hear a tape playing when no one pressed play, if static starts to sound like breathing, if the voice sounds familiar, turn it off. Because some recordings don't capture sound, they capture you. In 2014, a graduate student named Evan Miller moved into a small apartment near his university. Old building, thin walls, the kind of place where every sound feels closer than it should. On his 3rd night there, Evan woke up suddenly. No noise, no nightmare, just that strange feeling of being watched. He checked his phone, 2:17 a.m. That's when he noticed something wrong. There was a door where there hadn't been one before, at the end of the hallway. White paint, no handle, no frame, just a door. Evan stood there for nearly 10 minutes, staring. Then it vanished. The hallway returned to normal, and Evan convinced himself he had imagined it. But the next night, at 2:17 a.m., it came back. On the seventh night, Evan opened the door. Inside was a room that didn't match the apartment. No windows, no furniture, just a single chair and a tape recorder on the floor. The recorder turned on by itself, and Evan heard a voice, not a stranger's, his own. "If you're hearing this, you stayed too long." The tape ended, the door slammed shut behind him, and the lights went out. When Evan woke up, he was back in his bed. Morning sunlight, normal hallway, but something had changed. The apartment felt smaller, like a piece of it was missing. And every night at 2:17, Evan started losing time. Minutes at first, then hours. He would wake up with dust on his clothes and footprints on the floor leading to the hallway. Evan searched online, and he wasn't alone. Forums, archived blogs, deleted posts, hundreds of people describing the same thing, the same time, the same door, the same room, and none of them were still active. Evan found one final message saved in a cache from years ago. The room is not a place. It is a process. It removes you slowly, piece by piece, until there is nothing left to remove. That night, Evan set up a camera facing the hallway. At 2:17 a.m., the door appeared, and from inside the room, something looked back. Not a shape, not a shadow, a space where light refused to exist, and it was waiting. The next morning, Evan checked the footage. He saw himself open the door, step inside, sit in the chair, and speak into the recorder, calmly, like it was routine. This is how it works. You don't disappear all at once. The room practices on you until you're small enough to keep. At 2:17 that night, Evan didn't wake up. The camera recorded the hallway. The door opened and closed forever. The apartment was found empty weeks later. No signs of struggle, no missing furniture, only one change. There was now a door at the end of the hallway, and it never went away. So tonight, when the world goes quiet, when your room feels different, when you check the time and see 2:17 a.m., don't look down the hallway. Don't open any doors that weren't there before, because the room is still appearing, and it's still learning. This has been Echoes of the Forgotten, and tonight's echo is closer than you think. Slow ticking fades into silence.